Welcome to Talkin' SEC. Writer, photographer, and producer Phillip Jordan discusses the latest news and breaks down the biggest games with the best analysts around. Now, from Southeast Alabama, a state that knows its sports, here is Phillip Jordan.
What's up, y'all? Welcome into Talking SEC. I am your host, Phillip Jordan from Last Word on College Football, where I covered Auburn Tigers, and 96.9 The Legend in Dothan, Alabama, where I am the in-studio host and producer for Dothan Wolves Football. Thank you for checking out today's podcast. You can find a podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all your favorite podcast platforms. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe, rate, and review. It really means a lot to do that. If you leave a review, I will read it on a future edition of the show. You can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC. You can find the show on social media at Talking SEC Pod. Now, this is the preview edition of the show. I'm going to be joined by David Waters from the Gators Breakdown podcast, but doing it differently this week. Usually in the open, I would give the picks. Did that as I did it last week. This week, doing it different. You'll hear my conversation with David, and then I'll give you my picks for the week. David is on to preview the Florida-Georgia matchup this Saturday, the biggest matchup in the SEC, and a pretty big weekend in college football overall, because you also have, of course, outside the SEC, Clemson and Notre Dame. But anyways, let's get David on and let's preview Florida and Georgia. Everybody joining me today on Talking SEC is a good friend of the program, David Waters. You can check out his podcast, the Gators Breakdown podcast. And David, I do appreciate you taking some time out and coming on the podcast today.
No problem. Big game this week. Got our first taste of Florida football in about 3 weeks last week, so get to follow that up with the big game versus Georgia.
That's it. Do you still call it on your podcast the world's largest outdoor cocktail party?
I do. Too bad it won't be that this year. Thanks 2020 for that, but it will be. It's going to be interesting to that name will always hang around, but it's going to be interesting to see just what it looks like. Don't get me wrong. Going to Gainesville on game day is already weird enough, but everything that's around Florida, Georgia, the RV city and the partying and just the fairgrounds and the amount of orange and blue and red and black mixed together that you're not going to see Saturday. That's going to be, home games are weird enough and not seeing the tailgate and all that, but in an event that's pretty much known for it and not seeing it, it's really going to hit hard going into that game on Saturday.
Yeah, it's always cool for me just watching it on TV when they do the wide shot of the stadium. You see, the fans separate. Like on one side is to Florida and the other side is to Georgia. And you kind of answered one of my questions was the atmosphere going into. So I guess that is weird. It's just, it's weird altogether. But I guess at the end of the day, we got to be thankful that we do have it, have college football and football in general. And, I was going to talk to you. The biggest change is, and just to kind of, I'll extend it since you were going to ask about it, is that, to limit everything, they're not even opening the parking lot to the stadium until 3 hours before kickoff. Ooh. They are trying to shy people away from converging on downtown like they normally do. Now, of course, the independent lots and private owned lots around the stadium can be used for whatever they want. But if it's a stadium facility or city owned and all that, good luck getting anything until about 3 hours before kickoff. And I'll go throw this out there, and this popped in my head. This is a game I believe is built for 2:30 in the afternoon Central Time. But with everything,
the schools in the city do not want that to be a night game.
But with not all that stuff, I guess now you look at you wouldn't want to go against. I don't know if you would want to go against the Clemson and Notre Dame game. I don't know. Two big games at the same time. But if it was for that, do you think this probably 2020 would have been a okay year to put this at night if they had?
Maybe, but they probably, they made a decision beforehand. I believe it's even contracted into the SEC contract that, before the SEC even announces TV schedules for the year, Florida and Georgia is already scheduled for 3:30 the last week of October, first week of November. So, like I said, they've got an understanding with the city of Jacksonville and the two schools that to keep it as safe as possible, that they keep that game off of a primetime slot. So, knowing that they did it well before the season, they still didn't really know where COVID was going to be the first week in November. They just probably went ahead and just kept it at that 3:30 slot.
Looking at this game, and I am going to bring up the Missouri game from this past week, but just overall looking at Florida for this game, this is year 3 under Dan Mullen. He is 0-2 against Georgia, and last year 24-17, it was a close game there, and that one and I'm not saying importance like job, obviously not. Dan Mullen's safe. I mean, he has done a fantastic job of Florida, but just going into this game, how big of a game is this for Florida going in, knowing they have lost 2 in a row, and perhaps this is you were favored coming into the season as to be the SEC East champion. So I mean, how important is this for Florida, not just season wide, but just overall?
Yeah, it's big. This was the year a lot of people were pointing to that if you were going to do it, this is the year to do it. And as you said, you go through preseason magazines and all that before the season, and a lot of them were picking Florida. A lot of Florida was a trendy pick for a college football playoff spot, and that was because people were finally picking Florida over Georgia. And now look, I know the season, especially on the defensive side of the ball, didn't get off to the right start, and you dropped a game to Texas. But you had already figured at that point, most people were already kind of pointing to Georgia losing to Alabama. So you knew it was going to come down to Jacksonville anyway. Gator fans circled this game anyway. But now the nation circled this game as far as what steps has Florida taken? What steps has Florida taken in being the top of the SEC and competing with Alabama and Georgia for a college football playoff spot, and that starts by beating Georgia. So Mullen's got to have some pressure on him, man. And it's year 3, and a lot of people are asking themselves, if you can't do it this year, especially with the way the year's played out now, but this was even before the season started. If you can't do it this year, when are you going to do it? And then the season plays out a bit, and Georgia has some quarterback issues. And now the week of the game, Georgia has some injuries on defense that Florida should be able to take advantage of on offense. So it's lining up for Florida to go out there and be competitive and walk out of Jacksonville with a win. And if you find a way to lose it, and then now, as you said, there's no hot seat talk, there's no job security talk with starting 0-3 versus Georgia. But I think the questions start getting a little steamy of like, okay, can't do it this year, when's he going to do it? And Phillip, let's not forget too, Dan Mullen's made a lot of off-field headlines the last few weeks.
Yeah.
Do those things get magnified now because if you go out there and lose it? If you go out there and beat Georgia, a lot of that stuff just goes by the wayside, and nobody really thinks about it. But if you lose, then people kind of start tying unnecessary knots together from the last couple of weeks. So this game is big for Florida. It's big for Dan Mullen, and could be a big momentum booster for the rest of the season.
I don't want to drag out this because it's been talked about enough this week, and this is a Thursday podcast. We're headed toward the game, but everything with Dan Mullen this week, because what happened, when they was going in for halftime with Missouri, the brawl, obviously Dan Mullen got fined this week. Florida lost some players for the first half for this Saturday too. But just what's been your overall take on what people have been saying nationally and everything going around Dan Mullen this week?
Of course, I'm looking at it from an orange and blue side a little bit here, but I think a lot of it got overblown. Especially, now don't get me wrong, did he get overblown himself Saturday night a bit? Yes, he absolutely did. But the talks of a suspension for the Georgia game, I mean, come on, it's taking it way too far. Should he have been fined? Absolutely. You can't go out there and act like that But we've seen previous head coaches go out there and chase down referees during halftime or after a game, and get up in their face and holler. We see it in baseball all the time, of course, too. Look, I'll go ahead and tell you this: Florida players loved it, and if that's something that they can build off of and go to the rest of the season and win some ball games, then as I said, Florida's just kind of stay in their own bubble. And okay, well, if you don't like it, oh well. Florida fans are used to that with Steve Spurrier, so don't get me wrong. So they don't really care about that factor of it. But I did think it got a little too far of calling for a suspension, and of course, it was just kind of on the heels of Dan Mullen's pack the swamp and COVID comments and the team getting COVID. It's been an eventful, off the field, kind of on the field because of the fighting incident. Just things away from football itself has kind of taken a life of its own within the last month in the Gator program. So that was just kind of one more thing to pile on there. But no, in no way, shape, or form should he be suspended for the Georgia game because of that incident Saturday night.
Yeah, I'm with you. When I heard people saying, I said, okay, y'all just trying to find something to talk about this week because that should not happen. Dan Mullen gets suspended for this game. Talking about the Missouri game, I get this is going to be a two-parter for you kind of in a way. But, first off, Florida finally gets back on the field. So I guess my first part with you is going to be just overall, how do you think they looked, being off that long is, I guess is why I'm trying to word that. And number two, I came overly impressed with their defense, and I want to get your take on that, and that's going to lead us into them going against Georgia offense because I think Florida probably looked their best defense for this year. Only 17 points allowed, which one of those touchdowns was a interception return. 248 yards, 40 on the ground. They forced 2 turnovers, and just real quickly, just some stats going into that game. They were giving up 33 a game, 495 total yards, 164 on the ground, 331 in the air. So I guess, just kind of roll that all in one. What was your big takeaway from Florida, and especially on the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, and Missouri had come in the last 2 games before that and winning in 2 different fashions. They went and won a shootout versus LSU, and then the week before had beat Kentucky kind of at their own game in a knockdown, slobber knocker, drag out type of game there. So you were wondering how Missouri would attack Florida defense, and then you find out the Florida defense is missing Donovan Steiner and Sean Davis and Marco Wilson. And okay, well maybe Missouri can take advantage through the air, even though the week before they ran the ball and they tried to run the ball. They didn't attack the Florida secondary a lot like I thought they would. I do think they tried to pick their spots early and didn't have a lot of success. Just Florida defensive front getting Kyrie Campbell back really paid off for the Gators, and we were waiting to see that. We know he's not an all-SEC and all-American type of player out there, but he's been a 2-year starter in the SEC right there in the middle for Florida. And he finally played his first game of the season versus Missouri, and it really helped guys like Zachary Carter go play some more defensive end instead of having to play defensive tackle just because they needed another body there. It helped Brenton Cox not have to play defensive end and stand up and play that rush buck end spot. So Jeremiah Moon could also play that more of that outside linebacker pass rush role as well. And it really helped Florida get into the backfield more against Missouri and make some tackles for a loss and string out some run plays toward the sidelines. And, all that with everybody they had to replace in the secondary, it started up front. It started up front because they got Kyrie Campbell back, and he made a huge mark in coming back there. So we'll see how that translates versus Georgia. We know Georgia's going to want to run the ball. And Florida come off their best performance last week versus Missouri, but this is a completely different animal when you go and look at all the 4-stars and 5-stars along that Georgia offensive line and the running backs that just keep rotating out there. We know that's going to be Georgia's run game. Florida has to be up to the task. They were up to the task last year and just let Jake Fromm convert 3rd down after 3rd down. But they held that run game in check last year for the most part with a banged-up defensive front last year. So we'll see how all that translates into this year. But for the first time heading into a game, you think this Florida defense probably has some confidence going into a game.
Yeah, and they're going up against a quarterback, Stetson Bennett, that's thrown 5 interceptions in his last 2 games. And it seems like, especially in the Alabama game, when they had to throw the ball, they had to go score for score against Alabama. He couldn't handle it. And the thing about it, when you look at these 2 previous games for Georgia, he's going to give you an opportunity because he's had balls batted at line of scrimmage, and who knows where that ball gets tipped, then it's might fall in your hands. So I would have to think that the Florida coaches this week are saying, hey, if you can't get the quarterback, get your hands up.
Absolutely. It's been an issue for the undersized Bennett. And he's made some good plays. You go back to the Auburn and Tennessee games, but I think his team started getting more film on him. They've been able to figure some things out that they like to do. He likes to throw in man coverage, and zone coverage gives him a little bit of trouble. Likes throwing to the left in the middle of the field there. So we'll see how all that continues. But it does start up front again. For the defensive line for Florida, not only in the run game, but the passing game as well, going to your point of getting back there, getting in his face, not letting him see over you. You get close enough, bat the ball. And he had some troubles with that versus Alabama. Had some trouble with that versus Kentucky that led to an interception. So Absolutely. It's a point of contention there for this Florida defensive line. And, kind of just going back and extending that, Brenton Cox, the former Georgia 5-star, transfer from Georgia, now plays for the Gators, coming off his best game as a Gator. What's going to be his level of being able to control himself with all the emotion that's probably playing against his former team? Can he hold in check? Can he still, like he did last week, can he hold an edge? Can he stretch a play out when he's supposed to? And then when he also is supposed to go out there and get to the quarterback and make a big play. So, that's the one player everybody's going to have their eye on. And it probably when Florida's on defense for the first time versus Georgia on Saturday, CBS is going to throw up, hey, here you go. This guy for Georgia, there will be a spotlight on him, and we'll see if he can perform under the lights in Jacksonville.
When you look at when the Florida offense is going against Georgia defense, of course, Georgia defense is one of the best in, not just SEC college football, but they're coming into this game banged up. And, of course, Richard LeCount will not be in it because due to the motorcycle accident over the weekend after the game against Kentucky, and they've got some other guys out as well. And you look at what Florida's been to do offensively this year, very impressed. Kyle Trask is playing great, one of the best quarterbacks in college football, and you got Kyle Pitts at tight end, which really see tight end because he lined him up at receiver, it feels like most of the time. Then you got Kadarius Toney, where they put all over the field. So when you look at with the Florida offense against the Georgia defense, what are you seeing where Florida perhaps can take advantage of some injuries or just some matchups?
Yeah, not only is LeCount out, but Jordan Davis, Julian Rochester for Georgia on that defensive front probably not going to be playing either. And you would think that's going to lend itself to, okay, maybe once Florida wants to come out there and run the ball a bit more, but that's not Florida's offense. Florida's going to come out there and attack with Kyle Pitts, with Kadarius Toney, with a few other options at receivers. The running backs are getting into the passing game a bit more. So I don't think you'll see, just because of what Georgia's missing, a lot of wholesale changes in what Florida really wants to do. Now, where I do think it can help Florida is when you have those short yardage situations and you're worried about an offensive line, defensive line matchup with what Georgia would normally have with Davis and Rochester. Maybe situational football is a lot bigger. Now these 3rd and 2s are a bit easier. You can keep the chains moving, then you go take your shot on first down. Or something like that. So I do think it really helps situational football for Florida in short yardage, goal line to go situations that those big guys are missing for Georgia. But with Richard LeCount being out, kind of that captain there back there for Georgia on the back end, you have to worry about some communication issues now for this Georgia defense on the back end. And we saw how they struggled versus Alabama with big plays down the field. Can Florida do a lot of the same thing? Now, don't get me wrong. Florida and Alabama are both explosive offenses, but they're explosive in different ways. Alabama is a get behind the defenders, explosive type of play. Florida is a intermediate, just a little deep maybe, but break tackles and make some explosive plays happen. Kyle Pitts and Kadarius Toney are that's how a lot of their big plays happen. So, look, Alabama doesn't have a Kyle Pitts or a Kyle Trask, but at the same time, Florida doesn't have a Jalen Waddle or Devontae Smith. They're two different kind of explosive offenses. But did Florida see enough versus Alabama that they can maybe take some shots down the field with a Trevon Grimes and get behind the secondary? So on the surface, you think probably Florida attacks the middle a bit, see if they can get these new defenders out there for Georgia, maybe with some trouble tackling or whatever. But there's still going to be the chance, if the offensive line can hold up, to take some chances down the field, see if you can replicate some of what Alabama did just a few weeks ago.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be an interesting game because really it's one of these contrasting styles. Georgia's probably going to want this game to be low scoring, and Florida's going to want to get up and down the field. And I think we've all seen what happens when Georgia gets an up and down the field game against Alabama. They just they're not built for that. So it's going to be interesting on Saturday to see who comes out victorious. And David, I do appreciate you coming on the show to preview the Florida-Georgia game. I feel like this is probably about the 3rd and 4th year in a row I've had you on the show. So it's always great to have you on during this week, and it's always great to have you on any time to talk Florida Gators football. And if the listeners out there wanted to follow you online, where can they find you and where can they find down the Gators Breakdown?
Yep, everybody can find Gators Breakdown at news4jax.com/Gators Breakdown, or your favorite podcast platform, YouTube version out there as well. And you can follow me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. All
right, everybody, go give David a follow and go listen to or watch the Gators Breakdown. And David, once again, I appreciate you coming on the show, and I look forward to talking to you again sometime down the road.
Thanks, Phil.
All right, once again, thanks to David Waters for being on this edition of Talking SEC. Always good to have him on to talk all things Florida Gators football. fun preview there of the Florida-Georgia matchup as well. And then on Tuesday's show, I am going to be joined by former Georgia walk-on Candler Cook. He also wrote a book, From Underdog to Bulldog. I interviewed him on another podcast probably about a year and a half ago. So it's going to be fun to have Candler on. He had made an appearance last year during the season as well. So we'll get his breakdown of the Florida-Georgia matchup. And we'll also get his thoughts on the SEC as a whole and moving forward for Georgia with whatever happens between their game with Florida this Saturday. Now, I'm going to pick this game last, which there's only 4 games in the SEC this Saturday. No 11 o'clock game. You have Kentucky, Missouri, Alabama, Auburn, LSU, and Ole Miss off this week. So a lot of teams are off. That's why you only have 4 games. I do believe this is the end of the scheduled off weeks. Of course, you never know what could happen with COVID, so we could have like a cancellation or a reschedule with some games. But if that doesn't happen the rest of the way, except for the 12th, where you will have Missouri, Vanderbilt, and LSU, Florida, we should go all the way through where we have 7 games every Saturday. So we get full slates of game after this upcoming week. But anyways, you'll have Vanderbilt at Mississippi State. Like I said, I'm going to do the Florida-Georgia game last here. Vanderbilt at 0-4 will be playing Mississippi State, who is 1-4. This is a 2:30 Central Time kickoff on the SEC Network. This will also be a game where Mississippi State's a 19-point favorite here. Mississippi State, obviously, it's been well documented. The offense has struggled since their 44-34 victory over LSU to start the season. They have only scored 30 points since then. I do believe they've only scored 2 offensive touchdowns since that game. Vanderbilt has been a struggle offensively for them too. They scored 21 against Ole Miss, but the previous weeks they scored 7, 7, and 12. I'm going to take Mississippi State here, so Vanderbilt's going 0-5. I'll be honest with you, I don't think Vanderbilt is winning a game this season. I don't see it in it with the all SEC on the schedule. I wonder what happens with Derek Mason in the year if that happens. Mississippi State, I'm not calling this a get-right game like it was last week when Ole Miss played Vanderbilt, but I do believe Mississippi State will take this game and get some points on the board. Texas A&M, the number 7 Texas A&M Aggies, will play at South Carolina. A&M, they are 4-1 on the year. Only loss was to Alabama. South Carolina, they are 2-3 on the year, and they were off last week, and before that they were defeated pretty soundly by LSU. A&M comes in as a 10-point favorite here. I like A&M there. A&M's playing really well here. South Carolina is not a bad football team, but they're not really good enough to win here. And the LSU game made a lot of mistakes too. Didn't take opportunities when they were in good scoring position. Had some turnovers there as well. But I like the A&M Aggies in this one. Then you have Tennessee playing Arkansas in Fayetteville. This is a couple of 2-3 teams, but feel completely different. Tennessee's coming off an off week where they have lost 3 games in a row. Ever since they had that 21-17 lead in Game 3 against Georgia, they have not looked good since then. Looks like from all signs that Garetano will be the quarterback on Saturday for Tennessee. And look, Arkansas, they are 2-3, but they're in a good spot. You could tell this program's headed in the right direction. Tennessee, I don't know on the other side. Tennessee, they are a 1.5-point favorite here. This is a 6:30 game over on SEC Network. I am going to go with Arkansas here. I think Arkansas is just playing better. And I like the way Felipe Franks is playing, really. He's played really well this year. He's actually shown some growth even from his Florida days. I kind of wondered, getting away from Dan Mullen, where would his development be? But he's playing really well. So I like Arkansas to win this one. And then finally, you do have number 8 Florida versus number 5 Georgia. I'm going to call it. I know they don't officially call this anymore, but look, this is what it is. The world's largest outdoor cocktail party, even though, like me and David talking about, not really this year, with the fact there's no tailgating and all the restrictions due to COVID. Georgia sits here on a Wednesday evening when I'm recording these picks as a 3.5-point favorite. Of course, this is 2:30 kickoff Central Time on CBS. Georgia's beat up on defense. A lot of injuries. There's 5-star talent all over the place on defense. But I do believe they will have some issues defensively in this game because inexperience will take a toll, I think. And another thing with the offense for Georgia in this game, what's the health status of George Pickens? He did not play against Kentucky. So if that element's there too, and if Florida does come to this thing with a little bit more confidence defensively. I think Florida can take advantage of some things, and can Stetson Bennett, if he has to, I wouldn't say go toe-to-toe with Kyle Trask in the Florida offense, but putting up enough points to win, I don't think Georgia can do it. I think Florida finds some matchup issues with Georgia, and I like Florida to win this game. I think Florida wins this game by a touchdown. It's pretty close. If I was going to give it a score, I would probably give Florida 31, Georgia 24 on this one. And just a bonus pick, we do have Notre Dame and Clemson. And look, Clemson, ACC team, but they are in SEC country where they play in South Carolina. I am going to take Notre Dame in the upset bid on that one. So just throw that one out there while we're at it, picking some games here. So that's 5 games. We'll see how I do on that. Anyways, that is going to do it for this edition of Talking SEC. Remember, be back on Tuesday with Candler Cook to recap the weekend of the SEC, and we'll talk, of course, Florida, Georgia. Get Candler's thoughts. Always good to get a former player's take on what's going on the field, because he can tell you things I can't, because I didn't play. I just love the game, love watching it every single week. Remember, you can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC, and you can follow the show on Twitter at Talking SEC Pod. Remember, you can follow me on social media at PJordanSEC. You can find the show on Twitter at Talking SEC Pod. You can listen to podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe, rate, and review. It means a lot. If you do that, if you leave a review, I will read it on a future edition of the show. You can always email me at sports.philipjordan@gmail.com, and make sure to check me out on social media. Got the Phillip Jordan podcast coming back here soon. I was going to bring it back this week, but with everything going on, people's minds may be somewhere else than checking out a new podcast I'm starting, which is kind of a re-debut of an old show. But anyways, hold that off to next week. Got some good stuff going with that, so go find that on social media as well. I do appreciate you guys taking time out to listen to the show every single day or week. Whenever you do listen to it, it really, really does mean a lot. Well, guys, I'm going to get out of here. I hope everybody has a great weekend. Enjoy the games on Saturday. Until next time, bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Talkin' SEC. Follow Phillip on social media at PJordanSEC and the show at Talkin' SEC Pod. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcast or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next time when we're talking SEC.